the U.S. China trade war of 2018 didn't erupt overnight. Its roots stretch back decades, woven into the fabric of global commerce and shifting economic power. The conflict was years in the making, shaped by changing landscapes in both countries, economically, politically, and socially. For years, American leaders watched with concern as the trade deficit with China ballooned, and manufacturing jobs vanished from towns across the Midwest and Rust Belt. But it wasn't just about numbers. The U.S. accused China of unfair trade practices, alleging intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and state subsidies that tilted the playing field. Washington argued these issues threatened not only American innovation and competitiveness, but also the future of entire industries, from technology to agriculture. After years of tense negotiations and failed talks, the U.S. decided to act. Tariffs became the weapon of choice, a bold move meant to pressure China into changing its ways. This decision sent shockwaves through global trade, and put American farmers, especially those growing soybeans, directly in the crosshairs of retaliation. For many in rural America, international trade policy had always seemed distant, something decided far away in Washington or Beijing. Yet China was their biggest customer, especially for crops like soybeans, creating a vital partnership that fueled rural prosperity and kept small towns alive. Few could have predicted how quickly this foundation would crumble, as tariffs and counter-tariffs threatened to unravel years of hard-won progress. Fields that once symbolized stability and hope soon became battlegrounds of uncertainty, with farmers facing choices they never imagined. The first shots of the trade war would hit hardest in the American heartland, forever changing the relationship between global politics and rural life. In 2018, the U.S. imposed sweeping tariffs on Chinese imports, marking a dramatic escalation in trade tensions between the world's two largest economies. The move was intended to protect American industries and address long-standing concerns over trade imbalances and intellectual property theft, but instead it signaled a new era of confrontation, with both sides digging in for a prolonged economic standoff. The world watched as negotiations grew tense and uncertainty spread through global markets. China retaliated by targeting American agriculture, especially soybeans, pork, and sorghum, crops that had become staples in the Chinese market and were vital to U.S. farmers' livelihoods. Suddenly, U.S. farm goods became too expensive for Chinese buyers, and long-standing trade relationships were thrown into chaos almost overnight. Orders vanished, shipments stalled, and years of careful supply chain building unraveled in a matter of weeks. Farmers who had invested in expanding their operations for the Chinese market were left stranded. Farmers faced a glut of unsold crops and plummeting prices. Storage bins overflowed with last season's harvest, and the value of their hard work dropped with every passing day. Many couldn't cover their costs, pushing family farms to the brink. For some, generations of work and tradition were suddenly at risk of being lost forever. The pain rippled through rural communities. Equipment dealers, seed suppliers, and local businesses all felt the squeeze. The economic shockwaves extended far beyond the fields. The trade war wasn't just a Washington debate, it was a crisis threatening livelihoods across the Midwest. Town meetings grew tense as neighbors worried about the future. For many, the sense of betrayal was real. They'd fed the world, only to be caught in a conflict they didn't start. The pride of feeding nations was replaced by anxiety and frustration. The uncertainty was suffocating. No one knew when or if China would return as a customer. Every phone call and market update brought new worries. The tariffs meant to protect American industry were devastating its farmers, leaving them feeling abandoned by the very policies meant to help. The fallout was immediate, and the road ahead looked grim. Hopes for a quick resolution faded as the months dragged on. Rural America was on edge, waiting for the next blow, uncertain how much more they could endure as the trade war dragged on. No crop suffered more than soybeans. Once hailed as the backbone of American agriculture, soybeans became a symbol of vulnerability almost overnight. For years, U.S. farmers had built their operations around China's demand. The relationship seemed unbreakable, fueling investments in land, equipment, and infrastructure. When tariffs hit, prices crashed to decade lows, and silos overflowed with unsold beans. Storage facilities filled up, and farmers watched their hard work sit idle, unable to reach the markets they depended on. Family farms, already stretched thin, faced mounting debts and the threat of foreclosure. Many had borrowed heavily, betting on stable prices and steady exports, only to find themselves trapped by circumstances beyond their control. The crisis wasn't just financial, it was personal, threatening legacies built over generations. The pride of passing down the family farm was replaced by anxiety and heartbreak. Stress and uncertainty took a toll on mental health across rural America. Isolation grew and support networks were stretched thin as more families struggled to cope. The pain spread beyond the fields. Local businesses, equipment dealers, and suppliers all suffered. The ripple effects reached every corner of these tight-knit communities. The trade war exposed just how vulnerable rural economies were to global politics. Decisions made far away had immediate, devastating impacts at home. The dream of passing the farm to the next generation faded for many. Hopes for a secure future were replaced by difficult conversations about selling land and changing livelihoods. Community leaders scrambled to offer support, but the scale of hardship was overwhelming. Food banks, counseling services, and emergency aid became lifelines for families in crisis. The scars ran deep, changing not just the economy, but the spirit of rural America. Once thriving towns now faced an uncertain future, their resilience tested like never before. The belief in stable global markets was shattered. Farmers realized that their livelihoods could be upended by forces far beyond their control. Farmers now faced a harsh new reality, one where survival was far from guaranteed, and the future of rural America hung in the balance. China didn't just wait out the tariffs, it pivoted fast. Beijing turned to South America, especially Brazil and Argentina, for soybeans and other key crops. Chinese investments poured into South American farms and infrastructure, forging new trade routes. By 2025, Brazil had overtaken the U.S. as China's top supplier. Even if the trade war ended, American farmers now faced entrenched competition and lost market share. China's deeper ties with South America shifted global power dynamics, reducing U.S. influence in the region. The trade war, meant to curb China's rise, accelerated its global reach. For U.S. farmers, the hope of quickly regaining China as a customer faded. The new agricultural order forced them to rethink everything. As farm incomes collapsed, the U.S. government launched the Market Facilitation Program, direct payments to offset tariff losses. Billions flowed to farmers, helping many stay afloat and pay their bills. The aid was a lifeline, but it was only a temporary fix. Most farmers wanted markets, not subsidies. The payments couldn't replace lost customers or rebuild broken trade relationships. Critics noted that large corporate farms often benefited most, while smaller operations struggled. The program prevented disaster, but it didn't solve the underlying problem. Reliance on government support made many uneasy. It wasn't sustainable. The real solution had to be new markets or restored trade. The aid highlighted the vulnerability of American agriculture. Long-term survival would require a new strategy. The crisis forced American agriculture to adapt fast. Farmers sought new markets in Southeast Asia, Africa, and Europe, reducing dependence on China. Many diversified crops, moving into organics, specialty grains, and value-added products. Technology became essential. GPS-guided tractors, drones, and precision agriculture boosted efficiency and cut costs. New seed genetics offered resilience against disease and climate change. Farmers became entrepreneurs and innovators, not just growers. The shift was tough, not everyone made it, but those who did emerged stronger. The sector became more resilient, efficient, and globally competitive. The trade war sparked a wave of innovation across rural America. Adaptation was now the key to survival. The trade war's biggest lesson: don't rely on a single export market. China's sudden exit exposed the risks of putting all your eggs in one basket. Farmers learned that geopolitics could upend their livelihoods overnight. The experience drove home the need for market diversification and political engagement. The crisis forced a painful restructuring. Some farms didn't survive, but the industry became leaner and more advanced. The new trade deal of 2025 offered hope, but the old world was gone. Global competition was fiercer, and the rules had changed. American farmers now operate with hard-won wisdom. Flexibility and innovation are their best defenses. The land taught them that seasons change, and so must they. The scars of the trade war remain, but so does a new resilience. In a volatile world, adaptation is the only way forward.